that was the whole system, and we haven't addressed that. And likewise with the Crown officers, the Attorney General, and again with the Solicitor General. Again, I don't have a particular problem with them as individuals, however, it's just the accountability, and again, it's unfortunate it hasn't been covered.
The so-called cars, of course it's called Carswell, but in fact it was made up of a body of largely local lawyers, but there were other people, so it was a consensus opinion, but they did sidestep rather the other officers, didn't they?
Yeah.
It did rather concentrate.
It was disappointing, but again, it's a record. If anyone wants to go back and look at it and challenge it, it's open to someone. But I think now, in a funny sort of way, it has cleared the air, if only put things back for 10 years, because they say as time progresses, well, is it right for the Chief Judge to be the Speaker? Again, I said I'm quite relaxed about it, providing he's accountable. I don't have a problem, and I do think I have a lot of time for Michael Burt. I think he's a good speaker, and in fact William Vallish, I think he's come over very well. You need a little bit of tact, good humour. It can become tense in there at times, but sometimes people say things that they get a little bit het up, and I'm quite impressed with both of them. So,
somewhat ironically, we have an ex-bailiff standing in this election that's coming, so that's sort of forcing some of the issues to be addressed, perhaps.
Well, I think he probably has his own personal agenda on constitutional issues, and it may well be, if he gets elected, it may be exciting times ahead. But there are other issues apart from constitution. But it's knowing how to marry this in, as indeed the issue of our position in common market. Sometimes we seem to be disadvantaged by not being in. On the other hand, sometimes some of the advantages we could have are not given because we aren't in. So
we have a sort of a surrogate foreign minister at the moment.
Yes.
Presumably there will be somebody doing that job after October.
Well, what's rather sad, and this is where I do despair at times with my colleagues in the States. I think it was Phil Rondell, Deputy of St John's, brought through a very valid proposition, which I think had already been brought forward by someone else, is that everyone in the state should be elected to a position. And here we have still a position where the assistant ministers, some of whom, as indeed we know last time, had never been members of the states, and yet were appointed to be assistant ministers. And I don't have a problem with them per se, but at the same time, it takes a little bit of time to learn your way around, and is indeed being elected a minister first time round. But I do believe actually that at least the ministers are elected. But here we have a situation where assistant ministers are not elected, they're appointed, and we have a position created purely by a whim. No one has a say, and recently there he was sending off a message off to Norway on behalf of the island. And yet it seems to be that was okay.
Well, it used to be that international relationships were dealt with from Westminster, so the idea that Jersey can have its own foreign minister is a substantial constitutional change.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. I do believe that Jersey should have a greater say. However, what I am saying really is those people who are representing us at least should be elected to that position. And again, I would hope that whoever takes over as Chief Minister will address that. I would hope actually that the Chief Minister would come forward and say, look, I do believe in the democracy of the else, that everyone should be elected, including assistant ministers. That would be great. It wouldn't require people like Phil Rondell and people like myself and others who are constantly bringing forward good propositions but are constantly defeated simply because it doesn't suit certain people.
That foreign ministry role is a step towards independence. That's obviously an issue which is going to be raised at this. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I don't think the public are going to get too excited about independence. I think they're more concerned about how much more tax they're going to pay and have they got a job and are they going to make ends meet. However, it's an issue that won't go away, and I think it's one of these that we will take a softly approach. But I do think at the end of the day that the more say Jersey has to say about itself, the better.
Mr. Sivray is contesting the senatorial election. I noticed there were no States members in his recent court hearing. Is that indicative of the State's feeling towards him, do you think?
I don't know about indicative towards Stuart or anybody, but it was an issue Stuart felt very strongly about. He wouldn't take advice from anyone, so one felt he was rowing his own boat, and I don't know how many people were that excited to go along and see.
There are issues relating to what the police officer power and issues relating to that, which you've asked an awful lot of questions on in the States. Is that going to carry on into the new House? Is that an issue? Because obviously it's not resolved yet. These issues are not resolved.
No, the difficulty is that the system doesn't allow anything to go on, because it seems to be that you can have all the evidence, indeed one of the issues, and I think that's the strength of question time, and one of the things that I have achieved in the last 3 years was the States did agree to my amendment to the question. We now have 2 hours, and it's very good. It puts members on their toes, but really at the end of the day we've got to have some mechanism of ensuring that ministers are open, and I'm very careful what I'm saying about being truthful, but giving full answers rather than evasive answers, and also when they're found to be wrong, that people can take action about it. Normally, again, in the other system, that people who are found to be at fault, some form of action, even as an honourable thing, of resigning, saying, well, I put my hands up, I got it wrong. And but here we've had indeed, I have been one of those, we know what went on with the Graham Power suspension. There were things that were not right. We've now shown that they were not right. At the end of the day, nothing has happened apart from someone walking away with a nice and golden handshake, and these are the things, and yet no one is accountable. I think you were at the complaints board where it was quite clearly shown that the Chief Minister was wrong to deny Graham Power the details that he was requesting, and yet that cost the taxpayer a considerable amount of money, because the Senator Le Sueur was represented by a legal person. That costs money, and yet no one is concerned about it.
Senator Le Sueur, this is his last term. He will retire from the States. Obviously a new Chief Minister will be appointed. Do you have, at the moment, a preference for anybody?
I hope we have a fairly open field. There are a couple of names being put forward at the moment, and I would hope we could find a third or fourth. I have a bit of time for Ian Gorst, but I don't know if Ian would consider it appropriate for him at this time, early on in his career. He's got to win an election as well. I hope he's successful, but I think he would be a good alternative. I want someone who you feel that you can converse with, someone you feel that when you get an answer from, you can genuinely believe the answer is given, someone who feels to have a conscience. And these are sort of issues that I will be looking for, so I can tick all the boxes and say, if that person can tick the boxes, I don't care whether he's a constable or a deputy or a senator, providing that person ticks the boxes for me, I will go for him.
The so-called progressive candidates are still not very organised in the States. There's still a bunch of independents. You're an independent. Do you think perhaps from the electorate's point of view it would be rather helpful if they were to work together for this election, to have some agreed policies, shared policies?
Yeah. I think the system almost works against it, partly because we have the executive and you have scrutiny. And then you have those who are like myself. I think initially everyone was part of scrutiny. And I think because people become disillusioned with scrutiny, that they find, and indeed I do, I think my time can be better spent not being part of scrutiny, but researching, carrying out things I want to do, which I think are not being covered by either scrutiny or the executive. If one looks at the number of propositions lodged by scrutiny, you'll find a very, very few. Even from results of their own findings, they haven't advanced proposition. And then when we did, as recently, the one that I think Home Affairs Scrutiny Panel brought forward about the role of the jurats as the court, that was a well-researched document, well-researched human rights angle by Jonathan Cooper, yet somehow or other that the States could throw something out as positive, as good a proposition as that, the evidence-based, and it wasn't even supported by members of scrutiny. So I can understand how people feel that I've done all that work, I've produced all the evidence. I do that, other States members do, and I'm one of those people who's often complemented with the research I carry out on my propositions. I can have all that evidence and it can be thrown out simply because someone doesn't want to believe you, even though you produce it, or they say it's not right and or it's flawed. And again, I think we've got to address that issue. I know Sarah Ferguson has got a round robin circular asking people for views, but I think it's a lot deeper than that. We've got to find out how the executive and the rest of the states can work.